The opinions expressed in the following programs are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of Rogers nor Rogers TV.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Talk Politics. I'm Debra Hutchison. This week, our attention focuses on the provincial arena. Our guest is MPP for Durham Lindsey Park. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me virtually. You've gotten used to the virtual environment, I guess, like we all have.
I know. I don't know how we're ever going to go back, to tell you the truth. It's just too darn efficient. Okay, we've got so much to talk about today. So let's get right to it. I want to start with the recently announced roadmap to our reopening. It's phase 1, 2, and 3. Specifically, phase 1. Let's talk about what's included in that.
Yeah, so I think everyone breathes a sigh of relief with the announcement of finally a reopening plan going in the direction of loosening public health measures and restrictions as opposed to tightening them, which we've all become a bit too normal, I would say, for everyone's liking over the last year. And so I've been speaking to many in the community, obviously by phone, because that's what you're limited to right now, but many, I think this has given hope to, that we're hopefully finally at the end of this. And so the government Premier Ford and the Minister of Health announced just late last week a sort of 3-stage reopening plan. And really you'll see some of the milestones within the plan are based on not only sort of like the case numbers decreasing and the key public health indicators going in the right direction, but also the percentage of the community that has been vaccinated. And so that's going to be the key threshold, along with the public health indicators, in determining us moving into the different stages of the reopening framework. So starting with stage 1. And we're expecting stage 1 to begin the week of June 14th. Now, everything's being monitored closely, so I'm sure we'll have more news to come on that in the coming weeks. But the first stage, when it is announced, will include an initial focus on resuming outdoor activities. That's when you'll start to see small gatherings outside allowed again, outdoor gatherings up to 10 people. You'll start to see outdoor dining with up to 4 people per table. And you'll also start to see some of the non-essential retail open at a 15% capacity. And this is all with the aim of you'll see really a theme of moving people outdoors in stage 1. With the thought being that the risk of transmission is lower in outdoor spaces, and also to start to allow those small business owners, the non-essential retail, to open with restrictions in place.
Now, I have to ask you, speaking of non-essential business owners, it is a very cautious plan moving forward, and businesses from the ones we've spoken to, we're hoping for a much earlier opening for them. Their frustration, from what they've told us, is that this is dependent upon, in phase 1, 60% of adults with 1 dose. You can't force someone to get that jab, and here their livelihood and their future is all dependent upon people willing to get that vaccination.
Yeah, and I think you raise a good point, Debra. And I think the milestones were developed with that in mind. I know personally as a local representative, I'm not interested in forcing people, to take a vaccine. That is a very personal decision. That being said, we have, I think, set milestones that are achievable. In Durham Region, we're almost at that 60%. in the update that I got just this past weekend from public health. So I think as far as that stage 1 milestone, I think it's achievable, and I think we're going to get there. Probably sooner than we're expecting. And then again, I think when you look at the milestones for that step 2 and that step 3, I think they're attainable. Without, as you say, Debra, without forcing people to take the vaccine, because that's really not the motive of me personally as our local representative or of the government.
Right. So stage 2 is 70% of adults with 1 dose and 20% being fully vaccinated. Stage 3, between 70 and 80% of adults with 1 dose and 25% being fully vaccinated. We're just hearing today, as we tape this interview, that BC announced its reopening plan. They're opening quicker than Ontario, and they're omitting the second vaccine as a factor. You think they're moving a little too quickly?
Well, I think we've certainly learned in previous waves of this that you have to be cautious, and with these variants of concern, things can get out of hand quickly with the level of transmissibility, particularly with the new variants. And so hopefully, we don't see additional variants come into Canada that are vaccine resistant, but we do have to continue to take steps cautiously, because the last thing we want to do, Debra, is go in the opposite direction of having to close down again because another variant has come across our borders.
Right. So let's talk about the vaccine rollout and the supply. The government recently deciding to put a pause on the AstraZeneca. Was that the right decision, and why?
Well, that's a decision certainly above my pay grade. I think it's an important one for our doctors in the province of Ontario, our chief medical officer, to make and to be comfortable with, out of an abundance of caution, with new evidence coming in, new reports coming in around the AstraZeneca vaccine. Dr. David Williams decided to put a pause on more doses of the AstraZeneca vaccine being administered, to have a look at all the evidence, to make sure we were doing the right thing for Ontarians, and then now has set out a pathway for those who received the first dose of the AstraZeneca to receive their second dose. And studies are underway to determine if it's safe for those people who took AstraZeneca to perhaps have the choice to take one of the other vaccines like Moderna or Pfizer as their second dose. And so I think an ideal world would be individuals who took AstraZeneca as the first dose would have that choice on what they're most comfortable with, either taking the second dose of AstraZeneca or taking Moderna or Pfizer, but we just need to make sure that it's in fact safe to do so before proceeding with that.
Yeah, I mean, you can understand the frustration, though, of those that went ahead and got the AstraZeneca because they were told, take the first one you're offered. And now in a world where they have so little control, here's just one more thing to add to that pile. Do you think in the end that the Ontario government then will have supplies of AstraZeneca for everyone that wants it?
Well, it's interesting. We've heard some discussion at the federal level where the federal government is worried we're going to have too much now of the AstraZeneca, and they're wondering what they're going to do if in fact there's all this AstraZeneca that we're not using. Should we donate it to other countries? There was that kind of speculation in the news. Obviously, those are just decisions that happen at the federal level that I'm not privy to at the provincial, but seems to suggest there's a lot of AstraZeneca that's going to be available. And the question is going to be, do people want to take that as their second dose, or would they prefer another option?
And of course, that all depends upon the studies that are yet to be concluded over whether or not you can mix and match.
Yeah, and I think the good news is the first dose, and we've seen this with all of the vaccines that are authorized for use in Canada, the first dose on its own produces a great level of protection, reduces risk of, that severe infection. We saw that. In fact, we were one of the first regions of the province. This feels like a long time ago now, Debra, but when a day seems like a year sometimes in politics, and then it flies by. But we were one of the first regions in the province for all of our long-term care residents to receive the first dose of the vaccine and then the second. And what we've seen is a real reduction in the number of cases. For the longest while, there were no new cases of COVID. And I haven't heard that there's a new case of COVID in long-term care in Durham, since the vaccines started. There may have been, a small number that have come in through, not the residents, but through the workers. But we've really seen it effective, at least in the short term. And I think we're seeing that across the population with those who have taken the first dose. Okay.
We've only got another couple minutes before we have to take a break, but I want to ask you about paid sick days. The opposition has been adamant that the provincial government should be providing 2 weeks of paid sick days. The government has been directing people to a federal program that will give you I guess, is it only 3 days of paid sick days, and then you have to apply? Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, the federal, this has been an interesting discussion to have, because I've on my own been having it at the local level, talking to business owners and constituents. And truthfully, Debra, I have not had a constituent write into me or phone me who has said they had trouble accessing the federal program. That being said, there's lots of people that had views that in any event, there should be a more extensive package, if you will, offered up to workers. Right now, the way it works is the federal program you can access under certain conditions, and it is quite extensive, up to 21 days, I believe the number is, that the federal program offers. But it's certain circumstances you can get it in. If you're actually sick, right, and off work for a few weeks, you can apply for it. There has been some criticism, which I heard early on anecdotally, that the requirements to apply were a bit stringent. It was difficult to apply. It's different than an employer paid program where it automatically flows, to someone's paycheck. So those were all concerns, frankly, that similar to, you remember the programs early on in the pandemic, like CERB, that the federal government introduced, where we took the feedback back to them, where we thought that they needed to be improved. And so we had been doing this behind the scenes for many months on the federal sick day program, and perhaps the risk of only discussing it behind the scenes with them is that our constituents don't get to see out in public the advocacy we were doing on that front. In any event, the program didn't see the level of change we wanted to see in it, and so that's why we brought in three paid sick days in addition up front, provincially, while you're kind of waiting to apply and figuring out if you qualify for the federal program. And so people will be able to have these days as employer paid, and then the employer will be reimbursed by the federal government. So it won't be a burden on employees, but it also won't be a burden on our small business owners and employers that are going through a lot right now.
Okay, I'm going to have to stop you there. We're going to take a quick break. We are in conversation with Durham MPP Lindsey Park. Stay with us, more to come.
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com for more details.
Just once in a while, at parties and stuff. If that's what your kid says, they'll probably also tell you that it's not a big deal. But that's no reason not to talk about it. You could tell them that you think that's a good thing and that you're really happy they don't use it that often. Then ask them why. Maybe deep down they know it's bad. They just need your help realizing it. From there, it should be pretty easy to drop off the hint that their brain is still growing and that they shouldn't smoke pot. At least not until they're older.
Visit drugfreekidscanada.org for more tools to help start the conversation. When you're online, Rogers TV on YouTube shares news and events from your community, like messages from local leaders, updates on the latest health news, local business presenting their new offerings, and how our local communities are working their way through these unprecedented times. Visit and subscribe to Rogers TV on YouTube for the latest local information.
On the next episode of Cinema Scene, Daniel Baptista of the Movie Podcast drops by. Also, my interview with Invincible and The Walking Dead comic book creator, Robert Kirkman.
I'm Debra Hutchison, host of Talk Politics. Each week we speak one-on-one with your elected officials at all levels of government about the issues that affect us all. Keep informed. That's Talk Politics each week right here on Rogers TV.
You're watching Rogers TV.
And welcome back. Our guest is MPP for Durham, Lindsey Park. In the first segment, you made reference to long-term care. There's no arguments that this vulnerable sector was the hardest hit with this pandemic, and then the pandemic exposed not only cracks, but craters in a system that quite honestly has been neglected for years. Moving forward, what is the government now doing to ensure that these residents don't have to go through anything like this ever again?
Yeah, Deb, thanks for the question. I think, we've talked a lot about this on your show in the past. And the two top issues that stood out to me when I was running for election that, we've all seen highlighted over the last year and a bit has been sort of the two main challenges in the sector. One being the need for really a more sustainable staffing model in the sector, and number two, the need to really upgrade our facilities across the province and build more high quality long-term care beds. And so both of those issues I've been working on since getting elected. In Durham, we have the new Glen Hill Strathaven that's soon to be shovels in the ground in Bowmanville. That'll be a brand new home. We also have additional long-term care beds announced up in Port Perry. Southbridge, who runs Port Perry Place up there, has been awarded a bunch of new beds. They're looking for a new site to build a brand new home. And so that's, some of the work I've been doing locally, along with, in other parts of Durham Region. We've seen at the Ajax Pickering Hospital site, there's a new build of long-term care beds, a brand new home that's going to be built right on that site and is an accelerated build. And then the long-term staffing plan. It's critical that like all of us, we want to go to work and feel valued in the work we do. And we want to have sustainable employment. And right now, the track record has been often workers in these homes work multiple jobs in multiple different homes, don't have a full-time position. And so we all have a lot of work to do to put our heads together to make sure there is a sustainable staffing model going forward. And we saw that mentioned in the Long-Term Care Commission's report that was just put out. They acknowledge it's successive governments. There's no one government to blame, but the reality is today we are in a situation where we need a better model, and we all need to work towards that. Our government's committed to moving towards 4 hours of direct care per resident per day, and the only way you get there is by hiring more PSWs and making them want to stay in the sector and making them feel valued.
Is that going to be attainable though anytime soon? The bodies, getting those bodies.
Yeah, we've announced a large amount of funding in the 2021 budget to go towards training new PSWs, basically free tuition for those who want to go into it, and allowing new programs at our colleges across across the province. And so that's all part of it, is, you know, making it attractive to enter the sector and giving incentives to do so. And so, you know, we have a plan to hire the PSWs that are needed to get to that point where we can have, I believe it's by 2024, 2025, 4 hours of direct care per resident per day across the province.
Okay, let's move on to the 412, 418. Not long ago, the government announced that it was going to freeze the tolls on those routes. There was quite a big outcry by people who said, forget freezing the tolls, they should be free. I want to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, thanks, Deborah. It's a question that goes back to, if you remember, and I think many do, in the 2018 election campaign, when we were all then candidates, but the 4 government members across Durham now committed to advocating to reduce or remove the tolls. And I remember being, Deborah, in a debate in Scugog in the 2018 election campaign and saying, you know, I'm going to advocate for this, but I suspect there are contracts in place that are going to make it very difficult to change the arrangement. I'm pleased, based on our advocacy over the last few years, the Ministry of Transportation at least is finally being transparent with the people of Durham as to why these tolls were put in place, how they were put in place, and what our options are going forward. So there was a report that was released. Now anyone can, if they want to look up the long report and see how we got here, I think that transparency is important, because even local councillors and mayors felt like they didn't have that transparency from the previous Liberal government when they put in this plan to toll these roads for the next 25 years, you know, with annual increases on the toll rates. And so basically, high level summary of the report, what it says is the cost would be about $600 million over the next few decades to totally remove the tolls on the 412 and 418. And those are dollars, that's $600 million that's going to go towards program spending, education spending, healthcare spending, or other program areas. And so the options are put forward now, they're costed. And, you know, I'm always open to the discussion with my constituents, but we just have to know that that's the cost if we move forward totally to remove the tolls. And so in the meantime, given the economic uncertainty for everyone in Durham and across the province, and looking at the provincial books, we decided to freeze the tolls on the 412 and 418, stop that annual increase that was planned by the previous government through to 2023. And so what that will mean is over the next 2 years, if you're someone that is a daily weekday user of the highway, you'll save about, you know, $55 on your bills total over the next 2 years. And that's just, keep in mind about the average cost, you know, by a light vehicle user of the highway, kind of end to end, is about $2.50 per trip. So all the savings by the freeze will result in that for that weekday user about $55 over the next 2 years.
Okay, let's move on to an issue. Human trafficking and the issue not only at the local level, but there is a bill before you, Bill 251, to help combat it. How big a problem has human trafficking become?
Yeah, this is an issue I knew a fair bit about before getting elected, but certainly have learned a great deal more speaking to the Durham Region Police, Victim Services of Durham Region. I had the chance to do a ride along with the Durham Region Police and sort of see in action how these investigations happen into this crime. And it's a terrible crime that really threatens not always a woman, but often a woman's you know, health and safety and her dignity. And it's a horrific crime that's happening right in our backyard here in Durham Region that we're often is kind of under our nose. We don't even realize is happening. And so we made a decision early on as a government. This is something we were no longer going to tolerate and sort of let fly under the radar, and we were going to take it seriously. And so all of that there were lots of consultations, but it's culminated in this bill and historic over $300 million investment over 5 years to fight human trafficking in the province of Ontario. And this bill will enshrine in law an anti-human trafficking strategy in the province of Ontario that has to be updated by the government every 5 years. The bill will also give additional tools to the police to investigate human trafficking. That was often something I heard from police services, is they really needed more tools if we were able to really take this seriously and go after it.
So where is it in the process?
So we're almost at the final vote. We're this week, while we're recording right now, we're in a break week from the legislature, but next week we're back for one final week before the legislature rises for the summer, and we're expecting the final vote on the bill next week.
Okay. Now we only have about a minute left, so I also want to ask you about a recent announcement about the Bowmanville Hospital and its planning grant, because they have big plans to expand.
Yeah, well, we've all seen during the pandemic, the importance of healthcare in our community when we need it most, and not having to travel great distances, to get the care we need. And so it's time that Bowmanville has a modern hospital with the growing community we have in Clarington that we can rely on. So I was pleased to announce the hospital planning process is a long one, but we were able to announce a planning grant to allow them to develop the plans to really solidify the proposal, and hoping soon for that formal next stage of approval based on the plans they're developing.
Okay, and on that, believe it or not, we are out of time. We could have talked for another hour. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Debra.
Our thanks once again to Durham MPP Lindsey Park, and thanks to you for joining us. Until next time, I'm Debra Hutchison. Stay safe, everyone.
Call the Rogers TV viewer response line, email us, or connect with us on social media.
My dad was a railway porter. It was just about the only job a black man could get. But he had big plans for us. Music would be our ticket out of poverty. I knew we couldn't afford that piano, so I practiced twice as hard.
Nice, Daisy. Okay, Oscar, let's hear it.
Turns out, I wasn't half bad. Then I found jazz, or it found me. It wasn't all easy, though. I faced a lot of hate. But I found my stage. They call me the man with 4 hands. Well, I don't know about that, but let's see how far this ticket takes me.
From Montreal to Carnegie Hall and far beyond, Oscar Peterson became one of the most recorded and celebrated jazz musicians of all time.
My husband is a wonderful man and a great father when he's not drinking. I'm so angry he chooses alcohol over us. If he really loved us, he'd stop drinking.